Hello there and welcome to the Go Ahead Dublin Championship Final special here on Dubs TV, part one of a two-part Na Fianna versus Kilmacud Crokes County Finals special. Over the next 2 weeks, we're going to be looking ahead to the Senior 1 Football and Senior 1 Hurling Finals, both between Kilmacud Crokes and Na Fianna. That's the first time since 1971 when St. Vincent's met Crave Kieran that both senior finals have been between the same two clubs. This week, it's the football that is the focus. Kilmacud Crokes aiming for back-to-back senior football titles as they take on a Na Fianna team looking for a first senior county championship win since 2001.
Michael Day.
A tight angle, might go for it, does go for it.
Seeing flags bunting around the area is the real wake-up call every morning. It's a real proud moment for all of us.
We're very, very tight, and our support has definitely pulled us through those tight moments, so hopefully we can get as many out on Sunday as well to support us. Very tough in the Fianna. We saw that last year when we played them and we were looking to overcome them, so we know we'll have to be at our best to overcome them again on Sunday.
We have huge respect for Kilmacud Crokes. They have set the standard really of Dublin football over the last few years, but we're really looking forward to coming up against them now this weekend.
Doran finishes it to the back of the net.
Okay, I'm delighted to be joined now by Coman Goggins to look ahead to Sunday's game. Coman, thanks a million for joining us.
Hi Derek, how are you? Thanks a mil.
And not at all. It is county final week, Coman. I guess, first of all, looking back on the championship as a whole, the championship campaign as a whole, how do you assess it? Have you enjoyed the season so far?
Yeah, look, I think the nature of the tighter groups, I suppose, where you've got 16 teams across the two senior championships is great. Not so much if you're in senior 2, I suppose, have been relegated out of senior 1 perhaps. But certainly it makes it more competitive across the groups, I think. And I don't think anyone misses, big scorelines in favour of one team over another team because potentially it was a mismatch in terms of abilities or whatever. So I think it works out great that way. I was fortunate enough through yourselves in terms of Dubs TV and also with TG Card to get into a good lot of the games this year. So I got to see a lot of teams that maybe you wouldn't often see through championship action. So a lot of clubs who are probably coming with young teams who potentially can impact on senior championship down the road. And then you obviously have the more experienced teams or the teams that have achieved maybe over the last couple of years who are still maybe dominant, albeit Na Fianna, who aren't a new team, certainly are new to the stage they're at this year for the first time in close on 20 years. So that's a good achievement for them. But I think there's a lot of promise coming through the championship in terms of hopefully new players for Desi Farrell to cast his eye over. Also for teams coming from Senior 2, albeit Vincent's and Sylvester's are obviously quite strong in terms of where they're at. But I just like the way it formats. I like the way teams get to compete at a level that's reflective of probably where they're at currently. And I think the system supports then good games in general across the group stages anyway.
Yeah, and I guess not to put you on the spot, but who's impressed you outside of Na Fianna Crokes? Who's impressed you this year from a team point of view in terms of looking forward to the future? I know you're a Ballantyre man, and would you be happy with how Ballantyre's season has gone so far in terms of progress made at the club, long-term future for the club as well?
Yeah, it's close on 20 years since Ballantyre reached that stage of the championship. I was part of the group that were there, I suppose. So it was great to see them back at that stage. Probably when the group was initially drawn, you would have been optimistic that they potentially could have got results against the likes of Templeogue and Raheny, who would have similarly thought that they could get results against Ballantyre, obviously. So it's great for them to reach that stage. What it probably does, and this isn't just reflective of Ballantyre, it's reflective of maybe those teams that are coming with younger players, is where there's a step in terms of playing against Ballybowden, Kilmacud, Na Fianna, St. Jude's, Thomas Davis to a degree, teams that have got to county finals, who've won county finals, that physicality element that exists, particularly in the Senior 1 championship, whereby time and space is really at a premium at that level. So you don't get the extra second that you might get at Senior 2 or in the leagues in terms of Senior 1 or Senior 2 leagues. So everything has to be done very quick. And then when you are caught in possession, the physicality that comes in the tackle is far greater with those more experienced teams. They're more seasoned, they're longer on the road. So that's obviously a natural component of a team that's together for 5, 7, 10 years, that they've done all that strength and conditioning work. So from a Ballantyre perspective, great to get to a quarter-final stage, but what are the learnings that they take out of the game against Ballybowden, who were very strong the day they played them in the quarter-final? and will probably be disappointed how they turned up in a semi-final. But there's huge learnings to pick up from that in terms of maybe turnovers that cost Ballantyre scores, or not delivering the ball quick enough in terms of creating their own scores. So no, I'm very partisan there and focused on Ballantyre. There was 11 other teams across the Senior 1 Championship. I thought Temple Oak had a nice model in terms of how they set up to try and restrict teams getting scores against them. At time, maybe their counter-attack didn't allow them create scores, but they would have been very pleased with how they managed to get results in games where it looked like they were beaten. And then Thomas Davis, while I might in some of the Dubs TV commentary come across as a little bit critical in terms of their transition from defence to attack, defensively they're very well set up and very structured, and where they probably just lack getting to the next stage is how quick they can get the ball from defence to attack and create and put teams on the back foot and not allow them to regroup against them. I think so many times they managed to turn over teams having worked really hard defensively, but it took them 5, 10, 15 seconds to get the ball to an attacking zone, whereas the stronger, better teams, and better is probably the wrong word, the more fluid teams, the more experienced teams are able to move that ball much quicker, which then causes a problem for the defensive team as such. So I think a lot of teams will probably take solace from where they ended up in Championship. Jude's, I'd probably feel the most hard done by, I guess, in some respects, having been so consistent for so many years across the Senior Championship, to not make, the knockout stages of the competition probably doesn't reflect where they're at, given how successful they have been, albeit that arguably they left the Senior Championship behind them last year to some respects, although credit to Croaks for pulling it out of the bag when they did. So, there's huge improvements across a lot of teams. There's some teams maybe who feel that they need to go back and revisit where they got to this year and how you improve on it. A lot of teams. But I think in general, teams probably find their level across the group stages and into quarterfinals. And in general, when you look at the Senior 1 Championship in particular, the two best teams, in my opinion, have reached the final stage, and that's on the back of good performances through group and quarters and semis. Yeah, that was a very long-winded answer, I'd say.
We're used to that. It's
you can edit this. No, you can edit this.
Yeah. I'd just like to ask, though, about Na Fianna and Croaks. There'd be many people's favourites to reach the final pretty much all season if they could be kept apart in the quarter-final and the semi-final draw in particular. It's obviously worked out that way. You do feel they are the two best teams in the county in this championship campaign?
Yeah, definitely. I won't say Na Fianna are surprised. They've had successful underage teams coming through, and there was always a question would they be able to gel together at senior level and get to a championship final and then obviously be good enough to go on and win it. So there's probably been a couple of seasons where they felt they were unlucky. There was a game a couple of seasons ago against Ballybowden where they were probably unlucky to come out the wrong side of it. I think they lost a player, was sent off in that game, put them down to 14 men, which made it difficult for them. So they have the nucleus of a great team because of the individual talent that's within it. And maybe they just haven't managed to connect that all together to get to the point they are this year. So they've certainly been a coming team. I think, and I said this on the day, the result against Jude's for me was a big result for them because over the last number of years, they haven't managed to beat one of those top 4 or 5 teams. And when I talk about the top 4 to 5 teams, you're talking Croaks, Ballybowden, Vincent's when they've been there as such. So that league of competition that you're up against. So for them to beat Jude's, albeit in the group stages of the competition, I think that gave them a massive fill-up in terms of going on into knockout stages and thinking, well, we've now demonstrated we can get to where Jude's, who were championship finalists last year, were. So that then gives you a little bit of confidence that you can try and push on past that. Their performance the last day in terms of their first half performance in particular was exceptional and almost got their foot in the door to the final by half time. You have to go and see out the game, which they did, obviously. So I've been impressed with how they've grown from that Jude's game, but I do think the result against Jude gave them the lift that they needed to show that they're in a position now to at least get to a championship final. And then on the flip side of that, you can't but be impressed by Kilmacud, beating All-Ireland finalists last year, to come back again and be as consistent as they have been through the group stages, unbeaten, getting to quarterfinals and semi-finals, and probably had a tougher route in terms of their game against Coola, getting to where they've landed in terms of the championship final again. But their fluidity and movement, their panel, their ability to transition so quick, their ability for the likes of Rory O'Carroll, who's centre-back and renowned for his defending, to pop up and score 2 goals in a championship game, that movement and fluidity that they have throughout the team obviously pitches them as favourites going into the weekend, in my opinion. Not that Na Fianna are too far behind them, but I certainly think when you look at it in totality and to get to the nub of your question, the results, the performances, definitely Crokes and Na Fianna are the two best teams at Senior 1 and deserve to be where they're at in terms of building to a championship final this weekend.
Okay, good stuff. Let's hear from both camps ahead of Sunday's game. We caught up with both captains ahead of the final this Sunday. Na Fianna captain Alistair Fitzgerald and first of all Kilmacud Crokes captain Shane Cunningham. Okay, joined by Shane Cunningham, the Kilmacud Crokes captain here at Parnell Park ahead of Sunday's go-ahead Dublin Senior 1 football final against Na Fianna. 4:30 here on Sunday afternoon is the game. Shane, you're back again for another county final. You're getting used to this at this stage. How's preparation going for this weekend?
Yeah, it's going well. Obviously we've had a tough few games against Thomas Davies and Coola, and the group stage as well. We had a tough few games, so preparation is going well. Training this week we'll just be tapering down, so hopefully we'll all be 100% for Sunday.
How do you assess your campaign so far? It's gone pretty well for yourselves. You seem to be playing pretty well all campaign. How do you assess it so far?
Yeah, it's been going well. There was a few performances that we weren't happy with, and stages of games where we definitely needed to improve. And I think we'll definitely need to improve a lot more to overcome Na Fianna on Sunday. They're a very strong side, so we know we'll have to be at our very best to beat them.
Like I mentioned, it's your second county final in a row, but I guess it's different this year because you're the defending champions this year. So in a lot of ways you have a target on your back this year, which you didn't have last year. How has that been, that challenge of trying to go back to back and all the challenges I guess that brings to the team?
Yeah, well, like I said, I think the Dublin Championship is always an absolute minefield, no matter who you play against. You go into games and people expect you to overcome teams that they perceive you to be weaker teams and us to be superior, and it's always such a tough challenge. And again this year, although we're county champions, it's still extremely tough. The challenges we face on any given day are always very tough, and I'm sure it'll be the same again on Sunday.
It's a pretty young panel that you have. You had a young panel last year. I'm sure the experience of last year's final will help you. You've a young enough panel, but also plenty of experience in the panel as well. And we all know the names that are in the panel as well. So it's a nice blend that you have there. But I'm sure the experience of last year's final will help the guys this weekend.
Yeah, it's definitely a nice mix. Like unfortunately now I'm kind of one of the older lads on the team, but definitely the younger lads as well coming on the team would have had the experience of last year. And they would have had experience playing maybe big games at Dublin Minor, Dublin 21s. But I think it's the same for Na Fianna as well. The strength and depth that both teams have. Lads definitely have experience playing in big games.
It's plenty of excitement in the club this week. A big 2 weeks for the club. Obviously the football final is this weekend, the hurling final the weekend after. Both Kilmacud Crokes and Na Fianna in both games. So it's a big couple of weeks for the club.
Absolutely, yeah. Like you said, we're in the final this Sunday and the hurlers are the following Sunday, and the ladies footballers won their county title for the first time in the history of the club as well. So there's definitely a great buzz around the club, and look, hopefully we can continue that on Sunday.
What can you expect from Na Fianna this weekend?
Like I said, Na Fianna, they're a very strong team. They've talent all over the pitch, and they've definitely very good players that are going to have to be looked after, and then defensively as well, that they've a good structure in place. So we're going to have to be at our best.
Yeah, and finally, you mentioned the kind of excitement around the club. I guess you're looking for a big support here at Parnell Park this weekend. I know the support last year played a big part in your success last year, so I'm sure you're hoping for the same thing. We saw the support for the ladies and for their final as well, so I'm sure you're looking for the same this weekend.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I spoke about it a lot last year. The support that we had a massive impact on us in games last year. You can remember a lot of our games last year were very, very tight, and we were down a lot of games, and definitely the support helped us overcome those moments. So hopefully we can get as many people out on Sunday as well.
Okay, joined by Alistair Fitzgerald, the Na Fianna captain here at Parnell Park ahead of Sunday's go-ahead Dublin Senior 1 football final. It's Na Fianna versus Kilmacud Crokes, Sunday 4:30 here at Parnell Park. Alistair, how's that preparation going for yourself so far?
Yeah, it's going really well. We're really looking forward to it. We've put in huge work over the year, and we've one more game to go. Preparation's been brilliant. There's real buzz, real excitement around the whole community. And kind of the team on a smaller scale, just so much excitement, and the thrill of playing in the final is excellent. Can't wait.
Yeah,
Talking about the year as a whole, and I guess your form has been very good this year as a whole, not just championship but in league as well. You've been able to carry momentum from a good league campaign into the championship, and you've been playing pretty well all season.
Yeah, so I think last year winning the league was a stepping stone for us, and this year we wanted to to go one further. We were happy with the league last year, but we were very disappointed in the quarter-final of the championship, losing to Croaks. So this year we wanted to to right a lot of wrongs, and yeah, momentum is a huge one, and it has carried from not only from good performances this year to the championship, but from last year as well, definitely.
You mentioned the quarter-final last year. The last, I think, 4 seasons before this, you exited the championship at the quarter-final stage. You broke that duck this season, victory over Whitehall Colmcille the last in the quarter-final this stage, and obviously you're into the final now, and deservedly into the final as well. So you feel that's probably a big step forward in terms of getting beyond the quarter-final, and you're into a first county final, I think, for the first time since 2005 for the club.
Yeah, I think we had a really tough game in the quarter-final. Whitehall ran us very close, and on another day they possibly could have pushed and won it, but I think it was a test of character, and we prevailed thankfully in the quarter final, and then that set us up for a really good performance against Ballybowden, who I guess we have been on the wrong end of results against them in quarterfinals previous and years previous. So yeah, to get to the semi-final was excellent, and to win it was another thing. And as it's gone back to momentum, it's all rolling into Sunday. It's been brilliant. Yeah.
A big 2 weeks for the club as well. First football final, as I mentioned, since 2005 this weekend. The hurling final is coming up the weekend after. It's Na Fianna versus Croaks as well. So a lot of big excitement in the club over the next couple of weeks.
Yeah, it's huge. It's massive for both clubs. But I can only speak for our club when I say the whole community is behind us. We're leading 3,500 members, and we really feel that over the last couple of months, but last couple of games in particular they've kind of got us over the line, and it's really exciting. It's really exciting moments for the club, and I guess it's something that hopefully young generation aspire to, and they see both codes of Na Fianna in the final, and hopefully it inspires a couple of people to talk like this in another 20 years, to look back on these days and remember them fondly, hopefully.
How important will it be to have that support here at Parnell Park on Sunday?
Oh, it's massive. Knowing Croaks, they're going to have the stands filled with purple and yellow, so we are calling all generations in Na Fianna, young and old, which I know are going to be there anyway, but it's going to be huge. And as I said, the crowd, it really got us over the line. The last day we could really feel it on our backs, so it's not to be underestimated how big and how much of an impact the crowd make to us playing.
Yeah, and finally, what can you expect from Kilmacud Crokes this weekend? They're obviously county champions. They're a team that you, I'm sure, know very well. Played against each other a lot of times over the past few years in both league and championship. What can you expect from this weekend?
Yeah, we've had great battles over the last couple of years with Croaks. We have a lot of respect for them. They've kind of set the standard in Dublin football over the last couple of years. So we're well aware of the threat that they possess, and we're just really excited. We're really excited. They're the kind of teams you want to be playing against, and test yourself against. So yeah, huge respect, and really looking forward to getting out on Sunday. Yeah.
Shane Cunningham and Alistair Fitzgerald, both captains, speaking this week. Both men looking obviously to lift the cup this Sunday. Coman, we're not going to get your predictions just yet, but looking at both teams, they do seem to be pretty evenly matched. I would say both seem to have a nice balance between defence and attack. You mentioned Na Fianna already, and how they've worked on maybe improving themselves between defence and attack, but they do seem to fairly evenly matched teams in that regard.
Yeah, absolutely. There's no question that Na Fianna have some outstanding individual talent. When you look across some of the names, Conor McHugh, David Lacey, James Doran, you have Johnny Cooper, obviously all Merchant in terms of defensively, Donald Ryan in the middle of the field. So individually they have, such a collection of talent. They have a couple of workhorses in the team, and no disrespect to him, but Paddy Quinn has been excellent all year in terms of the workload he does for the team across that half forward line, takes on some of the donkey work, and that then allows the scorers get that little bit of space and time on the ball because you have somebody behind them who's trying to dig in and do all the work. So from an attacking point of view, and they're not too shabby defensively, but from an attacking point of view, there's lots of scores in that Na Fianna forward line, and it's really trying to get Conor McHugh into the game early. It's really trying to get ball in and create space for him which is going to be tight enough at the weekend. But it's how do you get those guys in the ball? How do you allow James Doran be dynamic in terms of his ball carrying and creating opportunities either for himself or inside him or whatever? And then you have Aaron Byrne, who's pulling the strings out around centre forward, hugely talented, very willing to take on defenders. So attacking wise, they're definitely a match for what Kilmacud have in terms of attacking dimensions. Obviously, Paul Mannion is a significant loss for Kilmacud, and they're fortunate that they have a Shane Walsh who slots in and scores 8 points for you when Paul Mannion is missing. So there's a huge benefit. And I think in some respects, controversial, Paul Mannion and Shane Walsh in the same team might be a little bit difficult to try and work out in terms of who gets the ball or who's on the ball or who's right guy to give the ball to. In some respects, by maybe having one or other in the team, you now know you have a fulcrum in attack. So Shane Walsh is our guy that we want to get the ball to. And again, not being disrespectful to the guys around him. Similar to when Paul Mannion's in the team. He's your score taker, your score getter. So if Paul Mannion's on fire, you want to give him the ball. If Shane Walsh is on fire, you want to give him the ball. When they're both of them in the team, maybe that becomes a little bit more tricky for guys around who do we pick out to pass the ball to. So I'm not saying it's a blessing that Paul Mannion is injured by any stretch of the imagination. From a Kilmacud Crokes perspective, it's a huge loss. From a spectator view as well, it's also a huge loss because he's one of the best footballers we have in the county. Delighted that he's back in with the Dublin senior setup again, along with Jack McCaffrey. That's how good he is, and the lift that gives to the whole county and the thoughts of him putting back on a blue jersey is fantastic. But when you look at what Shane Walsh brings, and then you dot in the guys around him, Tom Fox out in the half line with Shane Horn, who does that role that Paddy Quinn does. You have a forward line when you match them up against each other. They're probably quite, I won't say quite similar because Croaks have achieved at a much higher level than the Fianna have, but there's certainly merits in both teams and guys that you could cross into teams. You'd say, well, I'd take him ahead of him or I'd try him with him or whatever. So from an attacking point of view, that works well. I think in the middle of the field, Craig Dias' experience is massive for Kilmacud, and I think that gives them a little bit of an edge in around the middle. I think they're probably going to look to work kickouts, obviously, and he's so dynamic in terms of when he makes a break, how he supports that attacking line. So I think that's an area Na Fianna need to zone in on and try and limit his impact because he can be such a standout player. And then when you jump into the back six, individually, you've got some really top-class defenders there. So you have one-on-one battles that are going to be down to the nub in terms of one guy trying to get the better of another guy. And when you look at it as a collective six, Kilmacud's fluidity is probably a little bit ahead of where Na Fianna's six are at in terms of what they try to do. But then when you flash in Owen Merchant's pace and that ability to break out of defence, and James Doran drops back there a little bit too, that then gives them a dynamism from their defensive line that Croaks have too in terms of, Dan O'Brien and the influence, the likes of a Killian O'Shea can have. So when you really look down on the teams and you push them against each other, I think you've touched off it. There's not a huge amount between the teams that you'd actually say, this is heavily weighted one way or the other. So now what you're coming down to is trying to pick out individual battles, and this falls back on the management of both teams, I'd say. Who do we put where to make sure that they have a less impact on the game than we'd like them to have, but that it doesn't overly impact on where we're trying to achieve? If you go over the hedge and you start to be so concerned with what either team are trying to do to the detriment of your own game, you're actually nullifying the impact that your team potentially have on championship final day. But if you can find the couple of nuggets in terms of we stop him or we put an impact there or we reduce the speed of that ball without overly impacting on our own game plan, you now put yourself in a great position to try and step forward and win the championship final at the weekend. So I think both managers probably have a job of work to do around who do we need to shut down and how do we go about doing that, which then in turn means for us heading into Parnell Park at the weekend and for the other people, spectators turning up in the day, it does tee itself up, and I hope I'm not putting the kibosh on this, it does tee itself up to be a really exciting championship final on Sunday.
Yeah, and you mentioned it already, Coman, about Na Fianna. You mentioned already about, maybe they've been a little bit unlucky over the past 2 years. They reached the quarterfinals in each of the past 4 seasons, and that's as far as they've gotten. But 2019, I think you mentioned already, they went to extra time against Ballybowden St. Enda's. You could say they were unlucky that day. Bowden went on to win the championship, obviously. And then last year in particular, they were very, very close to beating Kilmacud Crokes in the quarterfinal. It came down, there was a cross in the last seconds of the game, which there was a shot on goal. If it had gone in, Na Fianna would have beaten Crokes. Obviously, Crokes won that game, went on to win the championship. So they've been a little bit unlucky going out to the teams they've gone out to and maybe the teams they face in the quarterfinals over the past 2 years. What have they done this year that's different? How have they set themselves up this year to maybe progress from what we've seen over the past few years to become a team now that are obviously in the county final for the first time in I don't know how long it is, since 2005. You do the math, 17 years since they were in a county final the last time. So, like, what have they done now to kind of get themselves into this position?
Yeah, they probably will feel that they haven't shifted a huge amount and that they've been very competitive and looking to get there, as you rightly said. I think what they have is a little bit more settled in terms of knowing what people's individual roles are, and that clarity of role then feeds through in terms of the overall team performance. So there's some very dominant personalities within the team, and that's not meant in a negative way. So guys who've won All-Ireland finals with Dublin, obviously, guys who've been standout footballers for a county who haven't managed maybe to translate that into the club scene because they'd love to be as successful with club as they would be with county. And you know, I'm not going to compare it to Ballymun's success a couple of years ago where there was, you know, that group were together for 8 or 10 weeks consistently, which allowed them blitz through the Dublin Championship. But I think the fact that, you know, maybe Dublin weren't successful, there was a renewed hunger in guys who've been involved in the Dublin setup to come back and look to see, could this be the year that we try and gel things together with Na Fianna? And as I pointed out already, the way they approached the St. Jude's game, who are notoriously very hard to break down and beat because they're so strong defensively, they really went after Jude's early on. And that intent, I think, is probably a level that they've brought this year that maybe hasn't been there in previous years. And that's very easy for me to comment on intent when you're outside the tent, for want of a better way of phrasing that. But that certainly seems to come across, that they're very tuned into what they need to do to try and get results, and then how they deliver that over the 60 plus minutes when they're on the field. So talent-wise, there's no doubt about it, they have it. Cohesive, they've definitely gelled together a little bit more, but that intent and belief within the ranks, within the system, that we have the players capable of winning a county title, I think that's starting to come to the fore a little bit. And they're not jumping ahead of themselves by any stretch of the imagination. I think it's just the fact that they've been together, they've collectively seen how they can get results, they know how to get the right guys on the ball at the right time to try and get scores, and they have a nice knack of creating goal-scoring opportunities, which in most instances, when it comes to the crunch, that goal can be so vital in trying to win a county title, particularly a first one in 16, 17 years. So if they can have that eye on goal and they're focused in on it and can use the dynamism in the runners that they bring from the deep, I think it gives them a chance of getting goals. And across their front six, they have goal scorers. There's no doubt about it. So I think it's just an intent and a direction that they're pointing is probably the difference this year than anything significant in terms of styles of play, albeit they are well set and how they defend and then how they break out of attack with that pace. And as I mentioned, they're at a level physically in terms of their development a number of years on from their underage success where they're able to stand up and match what the Ballybowdens, the Kilmacud Crokes bring to the table. And I think that puts them in good stead going into the match where they don't need to fear what Kilmacud Crokes are coming with, and they need to, again, be very direct with their intent in terms of what they want out of the game, which is obviously a performance which gives them an opportunity to try and win it.
It seems strange to say, Na Fianna haven't been in a county final since 2005, so you might call them an experience. It seems strange to say that with a team when they have someone like Johnny Cooper in the team, one of the most experienced players in the country. But in terms of the overall team, maybe you might say that they obviously have an experience at county final. Kilmacud Crokes were there in 2018. Obviously, they were there last year as well. Does that mean anything? Does that count for anything on county final day or in the days leading up to it in terms of nerves? Does it matter at all, that experience that they have, that Kilmacud Crokes have last year, compared to obviously which Na Fianna wouldn't have?
Yeah, I think what Kilmacud Crokes have is experience of winning games when they're under pressure. So digging out games and you know, if you look against Coola, maybe they weren't at their best, they still managed to get a result and come out of the game. You look back at some of their performances last year and even through the Leinster campaign and into the All-Ireland series, and we leave the All-Ireland final out of, for the moment. They managed to get about winning games even when things aren't going particularly well for them. And I think that grows out of experience. The experience of being in finals, the experience of having your back against the wall, the experience of knowing that something big is on the line and that we need to find a way of trying to eke that out. And if you look back to the county final last year, absolutely from a Jude's perspective, there was an opportunity to go win it. But equally from a Kilmacud Crokes perspective, they were very close to losing it. But they had substitutes who came in. They had a way about going after St. Jude's that turned a game that looked to be so far gone from them into a performance that ultimately wins them a Dublin Senior Championship. And that experience can't be worked on at training, can't be worked on in a meeting room, can't be worked on off video. It can only be gained by being there on the day and knowing what it takes to go and eke that out. Na Fianna definitely have experience in the likes of Cooper, Merchant, Conor McHugh, who've been there on big days and have got results when it came to the crunch, but maybe not necessarily with this club group that they're with. Kilmacud, across their squad of 20 plus, they have the experience of winning in Dublin championships when their back was to the wall, and that certainly, in my view, gives them an advantage. And if things aren't going their way, that they can reset and deliver. The question for Na Fianna is, if things start going against them, are they able to find a way to regroup, recover, reset, and go after Kilmacud in maybe a different way? What the great teams have is a plan A, but they also have a plan B and a plan C so that they can adapt as things are happening. If you look at the success of the Dublin senior footballers under Jim Gavin, there was plans and frameworks, but they operated outside of those when they had to, and guys were able to stand up and be counted, led by the likes of Johnny Coopers and Paul Mannions across the two teams there. So when it comes to the club scene, are you able to revert from, if A isn't working, what does B mean? And are we able to call on a leader to step forward? And often, as you know yourself in county finals, the big name sometimes gets shackled and caught up, or there's too much expected that it mightn't happen for him. And sometimes a springer comes out of the woodwork who kicks 5 points, or who takes a ball off the line, or who's the difference between winning and losing it. And I think if Na Fianna realise that, they have enough guys that are capable of being match winners for them outside of their big stars. And Kilmacud Crokes obviously have that experience that they can fall back on if things are going wrong. So I think the experience certainly counts, but I think Na Fianna have enough in their ranks that they can hopefully have a system to reset, recover, if things start going against them a little bit during the game.
And Coman, where do you see the game being won and lost this weekend? What are the key matchups for either side coming into this game?
Yeah, look, I think from a Na Fianna point of view, they need to make sure that they get their forwards into the game. So that full forward line, Lacey McHugh and Brian O'Leary, if it starts as that, we'll say, they need to make sure that they're getting on ball and getting opportunities to get scores, which then, puts a question on, what way Kilmacud Crokes full back line lines up. I don't imagine Dan O'Brien will drop back in there to do a marking job. I think they'll bring him out around that half back line to be able to play ball into their own forward line. So where does that all come into play? That, probably the standard answer at this stage, that middle 8 section is a massive area of winning and losing the game. So when you come down to kickouts and retain your own possession, what you can't afford to do is lob the ball into the middle of the field or be turned over in the middle of the field and give, Kilmacud Crokes 10 or 12 possessions in the first half with the forward line that they have and the attackers that they have. So from a Na Fianna point of view, and in David O'Hanlon's case, the kickers need to be spot on. And then when it does go out around the middle of the field, that middle 8 needs to be tenacious in terms of winning the ball and giving themselves an attacking platform that allows them feed that inside forward line. If Kilmacud are able to impact that in any way and reduce the level of ball going into the inside line, then I think the Fianna come under pressure for scores further out the field, where I think Crokes are probably better set to get those 30, 40 metre scores that maybe Na Fianna would be happier to get the ball into that inside line to try and get scores. So that's where that middle 8 becomes important, and that's where Craig Dias's influence needs to be nullified from a Na Fianna point of view. So whether it's Michael Day, Paddy Quinn, whether it's Donald Ryan in the middle of the field, someone needs to take ownership of the impact Craig Dias has, and that really needs to come at the extent of sacrificing your own game to some respects, but trying to have some impact while you're on the game. And probably the standout player for Kilmacud Crokes is Rory O'Carroll, who goes, I won't say under the radar because he doesn't go under the radar, but he does in other respects. And in games where he scores 2 goals or he comes into the play late and creates a scoring opportunity, it's because the opposition team have taken their eye off the ball in terms of how good he is without the ball, in terms of getting into space and going on these, it looks like a crazy run he just takes off on, but there's method in the madness and that he finds himself back involved in the play. So I think from a Na Fianna point of view, they need to get on top of Craig Dias on that middle third, but they also need to look at how they take Rory O'Carroll out of the game. He's a brilliant defender. He'll be back the field, getting hands in all over the place, no doubt about it. But how they lessen that impact that he has when he makes his way into the attack, creates the extra body. And I think that requires a job of somebody to actually, I won't say man mark him, but when it breaks down, that the first point of contact is, I need to hit Rory O'Carroll and make sure he doesn't have an impact on this, which then calls on others to come from deep to support the forward line. So middle third, massive, significant kickouts, particularly from both goalkeepers' point of view. will be huge, and can either team put a press on that allows them win, half of those kickouts that are potentially coming their way. But I think from the Finalists' point of view, they need to work so hard that inside line is able to be freed up to get space on the ball or get at least scoring opportunities. Will ultimately be the difference between whether they can get one over the line here against Kilmacud Crokes or whether Crokes will go on and win the game. So it's, battle out in the middle third, get your kickouts right. But from a Na Fianna perspective, how do we make sure whatever we do that we nullify Rory O'Carroll's impact and get that front line into the game, gives us an opportunity of going to win it. I think Crokes would be happy enough if it goes into a dogfight and there's limited space, because they have that way of eking out results. I think Na Fianna need to try and keep it some way open, give themselves some little bit of space that they can get the guys into the game.
Okay, good stuff. Now, over the next couple of weeks, we're going to be chatting to the GPOs and club coaches of both Kilmacud Crokes and Na Fianna. This week, the focus is on Kilmacud Crokes as we chat to their GPO, Niall Corcoran. Okay, Niall Corcoran, the Kilmacud Crokes GPO. Thanks a million for joining us, Niall.
You're very welcome. Glad to be here, Derek.
I know it's a pretty hectic time for yourself at the club at the moment, in a good way, obviously, with two Senior 1 finals to come over the next couple of weekends, and obviously the ladies' final a few weeks ago as well. So thanks a million for taking the time out to join us. A lot of good buzz around the club, I'm sure, at the moment. Plenty of excitement as well.
Yeah, absolutely. At the moment, we have our purple and gold day in the schools on Friday, so huge excitement there. I think the ladies had set the bar there a couple of weeks ago, and even on Sunday they have their Leinster Championship match in Glenalbin here, which is fantastically important to us also, and hopefully to go well there. And then we have obviously the senior football final afterwards and the senior hurling final Sunday week. So plenty to look forward to. There's plenty of excitement around the club, and there's lots and lots of colour, as you can imagine.
Yeah, it's a good way to be. And like I say, it's the second year in a row you've had that excitement as well, which is great to see that kind of continuing. Tell us about your role at the club. You're obviously the GPO, so tell us about, I guess, your role and what you do in the club on a weekly basis.
Yeah, so I suppose my role is ultimately about developing coaches, so coaches can develop players. And I spend a lot of my time in our local schools. We've got 9 feeder schools in the community, and they're all fantastic schools, and they're hugely supported by their principals and teachers in those schools who promote Gaelic games and promote Kilmacud Crokes in those schools. And I'll go in and support that effort in those schools. I suppose a big part of my role certainly over the last 6, 7, 8 years since the club has expanded more has been around coach education and coach development. I think we've certainly around 500-600 coaches in the club, so it's important that there's coach development and coach education provided for those coaches throughout the year. So a lot of my work now is spent on developing coaches, providing formal education in the sense of the foundations or the introduction to coaching Gaelic Games awards, the award 1 courses, and then some of the informal stuff. So at the moment we have pathway workshops ongoing, and they're targeted at CCC1 coaches, so coaches at nursery level and coaches at Go Games level, and that's just to support their journey as a coach and to give them the confidence and the competence to go out on a Saturday morning or to go out on a Wednesday evening and develop our players. And I suppose that's really how the GPO model works. The GPO can support the coaches, and the coaches can develop the players. I think that's certainly a more sustainable model. Other aspects of my job are around things like our camps during the year, summer and Easter camps, and then our Mini Irelands, which is a fantastic competition we run for the whole month of June, and it's a real, I suppose, sense of community and a family occasion where we get all our underage players down and playing what are essentially internal Go Games blitzes for the month, and it's a fantastic excitement there, and certainly the GPO also supports initiatives like that. So I suppose really the job has certainly evolved over the last 6, 7, 8 years, and it has certainly been targeted towards more coach education and supporting, the huge voluntary effort that's in the club at the moment.
Yeah, and we obviously know you played senior hurling with the team. You're involved with the senior hurlers now at the moment as well, as they prepare for the Senior 1 final next weekend. And you've spoken there about your role in as a GPO involved with nurseries and academies and summer camps. So you're in a pretty good position to kind of tell us about, I guess, the work that has gone in at the club over the past. You're there 17 years now at the club, so the work has gone in at the club over the past 17 years to, I guess, have kids kind of coaching kids at juvenile level and having them available to get to a level now to where you're at senior level, where you're competing regularly for Senior 1 titles, which I guess is like, it's the whole, your job is you're seeing these kids go from young age, from 4, 5 and 6 years of age, right through to playing adults level with the club as well.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a few of the guys now on the senior team. When I came into the club first, they were starting off at 5 years of age, and it's, it's that tells you how old I am, Derek. But look, again, they've come through the club. They've come through the pathway. They've come through the structure. They've started off at the nursery, and essentially the nursery is a really important stage for players and parents when they enter Kilmacud Crokes. It's their first experience of the club. And it's essentially my role to make sure it's a really positive experience and to ensure that there's structures there that's going to keep those players, develop those players, and keep their parents involved in the club. And it's great to see, I suppose, some of those players who've come through that, that pathway. And there's been, I suppose, a huge amount of support, and there's been structures have become really important around coaching committees and having really good people. I've been talking about really good volunteers who give up huge amount of time to develop these players, to come on coaching courses and to impart their knowledge onto the players. And I think over the last few years, certainly with I suppose all sections, numbers have really expanded in all sections of the club, particularly in the ladies section, and that's been fantastic to see. And I suppose you can see the success of our ladies football team, and certainly at underage with our camogie teams. They're stronger and stronger every year, and that will pay dividends in the future. But the success of that starts at the nursery, and given the player a really positive experience, and giving the families a really positive experience as they come through the pathway in the club, and certainly meeting the needs of parents and players at different stages of the pathway, and recognizing what those needs are. And essentially, as my role as a GPO, that's what it looks like, and it's ensuring that both parents and players experience those those needs, and those needs are catered for as they move through the club. And again, it's important to say that the people, the volunteers, I think it doesn't work without volunteers and mentors and people who sit on committees and fundraise and do all that certainly sometimes unseen work to ensure that the under 10 coach has enough footballs and slitters to run sessions on a Tuesday night. And I think that's the success of the club, that there's people and good people willing to get involved and willing to put in the hours to ensure that players and mentors are catered for, to ensure that we have, I suppose, success like we've had now, certainly at the senior level in our codes.
You mentioned already, obviously, we've spoken about the fact that you're there 17 years. You mentioned already maybe the last 7 or 8 years, the role has kind of changed an awful lot. Yeah. How has it changed? Do you notice a big difference from when you started out to now in terms of how important, I guess, those things that you mentioned there, the engagement at nursery level and coaching all the way through and coaching the coaches, how important that's become over the past 10 years or more in terms of giving players and kids the best opportunity to not even succeed, but the best opportunity in terms of having the best coaching available to them. Have you seen the big change in that over the past few years?
Absolutely. When I started my role first, I suppose there was a big emphasis on recruitment and getting into the schools and spreading Gaelic games in the schools and indeed Kilmacud Crokes. And while that's still important to us, because our schools are essentially where our players come from, but now what we're finding and what I'm seeing is that we have a large coaching population in the sense that I suppose in my last audit we had the guts of 500 coaches, excluding nursery coaches, and if you include those, you're up to maybe 650 coaches. So, and that's because our numbers have increased, more parents have become involved. And with that in mind, if the objective is not only to recruit, but to ensure that those players and parents stay for the journey, stay in Kilmacud Crokes, it's important that the role I have ensures that they are supported. And so the role around coach education has become extremely important, ensuring that when parents come into the club, we'd have a lot of parents who'd have had no background in Gaelic games, and certainly I'd see that as a strength, because there's sometimes no preconceived ideas around what coaching should look like in the GA. They're enthusiastic and they're willing to learn, and some of our best coaches have come to the club who have started off with little or no experience in Gaelic games, but it's by providing the education and the support around the informal and formal education that they need as they go through the stages of the pathway, to ensure that we can develop our players and ensure that they fulfill their potential. And if that potential is to play on the junior F team, or play on the senior team or represent Dublin, that's what it is. But I think one of the strengths of Kilmacud Crokes is that we have teams that cater for all abilities. So we've lots of our teams that that are lots of our age groups that have 3, 4, 5 teams in an age group, and that means that every ability can be catered for, and every child has a team to play on. And in order to ensure that happens, every coach must be cared for, and every coach must be supported and must be developed. So I think that's where certainly the change I've seen over the last 8 years are around the need for coach development and around the need for coach education to support the numbers that are coming through in the club.
I know the senior success isn't the be all and end all. There's so many clubs around the county and around the country as well who maybe don't have the senior success, but who are doing such brilliant work around their communities. But I guess it does help to engage younger people and inspire younger people to stay on with the club. I mean, when you're seeing someone like Paul Mannion playing for Dublin and lifting county championships, and Ronan Hayes doing the same thing, and Laura McGee doing the same thing as well, it does inspire younger generations to stay involved with the club and to keep going, because they want to be like those heroes as well.
Absolutely, and young people need role models, and they need people to look up to, and no better role models than the likes of Paul Mannion, Ronan Hayes, the Fergal Whiteleys, the Eva Rutledges, all these, we Daisy Davises, we've all these players who are representing the club at a really high level and indeed represent Dublin. And I think what these players also do is that they give back to the club. So you'll see some of our senior players down among some of our juvenile teams giving time back. I know this, for example, there's 3 or 4 of our latest footballers involved in juvenile teams, or some of our camogie players come down regularly and help out the nursery. Same with the senior footballers and senior hurlers. They're engaging as much as they can in our juvenile teams, and that's really important, because our young players look up to these people. They see them play at the big games in Parnell Park, and it's important that even though the club is expanding, that we keep that connection between what happens at the adult level and what happens at the juvenile level. And to be fair to our adult players, hopefully because of the good experiences they've had coming through the pathway and coming through Croaks, they are now, I suppose, engaging at juvenile level and giving back. And I think the effect that has on our young players is that it does inspire them to go and want to be the next Paul Mannion, want to be the next Aoife Kane, want to be the next Ronan Hayes. And I think that's something that's really valuable to us, and something that we shouldn't forget.
Absolutely. Just in terms of the ladies, you mentioned already, you said there's a huge work has gone in with the ladies footballers over the past few years, culminating in a first senior success a few weeks ago. Congratulations again with that, and a big crowd here at Parnell Park for that day, that win against Thomas Davis. I guess a lot of work maybe has gone in over the past few years in terms of incorporating all 4 codes and promoting all 4 codes at the club to achieve success. Again, senior one hurlers and footballers over the next couple of weeks, but to achieve success and to promote the game across all 4 codes in terms of camogie, ladies football, hurling, and football as well.
Yeah, absolutely, and one of the successes have been the nursery, the combined nursery, and I think that has kind of we are moving, and we are kind of looking at a one club model where when parents and children come in, they get to experience all codes, and I think the nursery, I think is the start of that journey. And what that does, that essentially is keeping players playing for longer and playing both codes. If you're a girl and you want to play ladies football and camogie, that's being catered for. If you're a young boy, you want to play football and hurling, that's being catered for, and coaches are recognizing that. And while at the senior level, there's maybe not too many, if any, dual players. When you look back at some of those players and kind of their pathway, a lot of them have played both codes and have had the opportunity. Obviously, those players make their own decisions when they get to 16, 17, 18 years of age. But it's important that the club and the mentors, in which we do, support their journey and support their aspirations for playing all codes and playing and representing Kilmacud Crokes in whatever forum that looks like.
Good stuff. Now, you mentioned already the volunteers and the parents and kids as well, obviously, in the area. How do people get involved at the club? How do you volunteer to be a coach or to administration, or how do you get your child involved? What's the best way to go about that if you want to get involved with the club?
Yeah, well, essentially just contact myself, or the easiest thing to do is just to log on to our website. All the details are there on our website. All the contacts are there, including my own contact. You can contact me directly, or even if you're around the club, drop into the office in Kilmacud Crokes and you get all the relevant information there.
Great stuff, Niall. Listen, thanks very much for joining us today, and like I said, the very best of luck. Enjoy the next couple of weeks, and I hope they go well for you as well.
Thanks very much, Derek. Appreciate that.
Okay, Niall Corcoran there, the Kilmacud Crokes GPO, chatting about the great work going on at the club. And next week, we're going to be chatting to the Na Fianna Director of Coaching and Games Player Development, Niall Cooper. That's on next week's show, looking ahead to the Senior 1 Hurling Final. Okay, predictions time, Coman. Who's going to win it on Sunday?
I know you're breaking up there, Derek. What did you ask me?
Oh, sorry.
I'm joking. I've said all year it's hard to look past Kilmacud. I've seen them in their couple of group games. I've seen them in quarter-final and semi-final action. And while Paul Mannion is a significant loss, a massive loss that probably any other team wouldn't be able to cope with, they do have a way of winning games when things are going against them. So my head would say Kilmacud, but I also think genuinely that the result against Jude's gave Na Fianna the fill-up they needed to try and start believing in themselves that they were good enough to win a Dublin Senior Championship. And again, I'm not on the inside, so that's an awful wild assumption that they didn't believe that up to now. But I do think that result gave them a lift. So I don't see it coming down to a massive difference between the two teams, and I'm leaning with Croaks based on their experience and their ability to win games. So I'm hedging bets here. Potentially this goes all the way, and you're down to the last couple of minutes, and we're in a draw game, and potentially looking to go into extra time, because I think Na Fianna have a goal in them, or if not two, that might just give them a way of getting at Kilmacud. So, I'm not saying a draw end result. I'm going to lean with Croaks on the basis of having been there before, having a bit of hurt carried over from the All-Ireland final last year, that there's something in them that they want to go and win that. But I see Na Fianna being very close to them, and certainly in with a shout of winning the game when it comes to 60 odd minutes or thereabouts. So maybe Kilmacud Croke by a point or two if it comes down to it.
Okay, and I thought you were going to sit in the fence there and call it a draw.
I was doing my very best to sit in the fence there.
I'm trying to get it out of you. By the way, the CCC have confirmed just over the past couple of days that if the game ends in a draw after normal time, it goes to a replay straight away.
Okay.
So there's no extra time this weekend if the game does end in a draw. The same with the Senior 1 hurling final next weekend. In fact, all the adult finals, if the game ends in a draw after normal time, it goes to a replay, and then after that, it probably will go to extra time and penalties. But
great stuff. I'll be home for the dinner, so if it ends a draw.
Yeah, absolutely, yes, exactly. So that's the Senior 1 football final this Sunday afternoon at Parnell Park. It's a 4:30 throw-in. Kilmacud Crokes versus Na Fianna. Tickets are available on dublinga.ie. And for anyone who can't make it to Parnell Park on Sunday, you get to watch Coman on TG Cahir.
I mean,
I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad
you just
thing.
can't buy this kind of stuff, can you?
Yeah. So live on
Value
TG
for
Cahir.
money.
Yes, the game is on live on TG Cahir on Sunday afternoon as well, if you can't make it to Parnell Park. Coman, before we go, a quick look to the Senior 2 Championship final. That's the curtain raiser before the game on Sunday, the Senior 1 final. It's St. Vincent's versus St. Sylvester's, 2:15 in Parnell Park. How do you see that one going?
Yeah, well, look, what a competitive Senior 2 it was this year when you see the teams that maybe dropped out of Senior 1, Vincent's, Bridget's, Sylvester's, teams who have county titles over the last 10, 20 years, certainly Vincent's and Bridget's more recently than that. So very difficult maybe on other teams coming up through Senior 2 when you have that experience facing you down the barrel of a gun. St. Pat's Donabate, where I'm out in Donabate now living at the moment, would have met Vincent's in the quarter-final stages and found the difference between where Vincent's are at, maybe where St. Pat's are at as a big step and a big learning curve for them. So, for Vincent's and Sylvester's, the prize has already been achieved in that they're back into Senior 1 Championship for next year. In terms of who goes on and wins that, I think Vincent's have, given the turnover they've had in personnel over the last number of years and the experience that's gone, to be still competing and competitive with some of the older guys that they have and the new guys coming through, maybe is a good reflection on where they're building to and where they potentially get to next year in Senior 1. And Sylvester's, they're a big name club in Dublin, so it'd be good for them to get back into Senior 1. Probably sitting with Vincent's in terms of just their know-how to win championship finals when it gets to the crunch, that they come out on top in that game. But as I mentioned, it's been a tough couple of weeks for them with the loss of Brian Mullins. And as a club, obviously, they've probably felt that across every aspect of the club. So they travel into the game on the back of such heartache across the club, but they've achieved their aim, I suppose, at the start of the year, which was return to Senior 1. And I just lean with them in getting a result at the weekend ahead of Sylvester's because of their know-how in terms of seeing out championships.
Okay, good stuff. So it's St. Vincent's for yourself and Kilmacud Crokes for yourself. Again, just a reminder, Sunday's games, 2:15, St. Vincent's versus St. Sylvester's in the Senior 2 final, and 4:30, it's Kilmacud Crokes versus Na Fianna. Tickets available on dublinga.ie for both games. And like I say, the Senior 1 final is also live on TG Cahir on Sunday afternoon if you can't make it to Parnell Park. Coman, thanks a million for joining us and the very best of luck, and enjoy the games at the weekend as well.
Thanks, Derek. Take care.